Welcome to All Things Marketing Podcast, the podcast that talks all things marketing for both franchise and multi-location marketing leaders. ATM is brought to you by PureDriven. We'll show you how to turn your brand into a money-making machine. Here's your host, Steve Rockwood.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to ATM. My name is Steve Rockwood, and I'm the marketing manager at PureDriven. Today, we are going to talk about discovering and sharing your business core values. I am joined by special guest Christopher Swanson, the CEO at PureDriven, as well as the head of franchise development. Would you like to say hello, Chris?
Of course, I'd love to say hello. Hello, everybody out there in podcast world. Steve, it's always great to be on your podcast. It's so much fun talking about these relevant issues that are faced, that multi-store locations or franchises that are faced with each day.
Well, it's always fun to have you, and actually this is probably the most I get to talk to you every week is when we're doing these podcasts, so it's nice to get to see your face every week while we do this.
Yeah, it's great to be catching up here with you in the studio.
Definitely. So today we are talking about discovering and sharing your business core values, and I know that you absolutely love your core values, so I'm really going to let you go on this one, but I am going to give you a few questions to kind of get you going in the right direction here. The first question I have for you is, what is a core value?
Oh, that's a great question. Core value is basically a value that you hold near and dear to your heart, so to speak. Something that you live your life by. So those things that are very core and integral to what we do day in and day out. And I think the one thing that's easy for people to understand when we talk about core values is, have you ever worked with a person where you're like, that person is awesome because of this thing that I noticed? And usually it's a very positive feature, trait. That would be something that often, if you dig into that, you'd actually find that there's a value structure behind that. Maybe that's somebody who just goes above and beyond to make sure other people are taken care of. Or maybe that's somebody that it doesn't matter. We're always going to take the right path. We're going to be people of integrity. You can go on, but you typically can observe that as a human of somebody and activities and kind of root to who they are or core to who they are. So, Steve, that's a long way of saying that's what a core value is.
Awesome. So you are the CEO of a company called PureDriven. What are the core values of PureDriven?
Yeah, we have 4 core values. And, of course, people recommend anywhere from 3 to 7 core values. But ours are servant leadership, adaptable, positive, and integrity. And those 4 core values came about through a process where we actually took a look around our whole company and started kind of digging in. And it took us a little while and some good research and kind of digging in to say what words really define what we see in behavior that we really love. And so that took a little while. So behind each one of these, we have a very specific way we say our core values. But the bottom line is it's very clear. We are crazy about these.
Awesome. And then one more thing on that. You recommend that everyone in the company knows those core values, right? And why is that?
Well, I mean, everything we do is around core values. We start there. For example, if we're hiring somebody, we're going to make sure that those core values are so tight to who that person is. Because what you find is that if you ever get somebody that's outside those core values, say you're saying integrity, which is a very common core value. It's a word that's used a lot with a lot of companies that have core values. But say you have somebody that's not a person of integrity is how you define it. That is a problem. You're going to find out really fast that it's not fun working with those people. And so that's really important. And we constantly talk about them because we believe in them so much. We want everybody in the company to know them, to have them in their heart, to be able to recite them, to be able to share when they catch somebody in a good way, with something that's very specific to one of the core values, an example. Very important. Why? Because that's a culture. It's an attitude that we want from every team member who works with us.
Awesome. And one little highlight on that is every quarter we have the company meeting with everybody, and we do express what staff members we thought reflected a core value and when they did it. So we kind of tell a short story of when they do it. And that's kind of cool because you don't really think of it in the context of core values in the moment, but then when you reflect on it after, you think, oh yeah, that really did show showcase the positivity of that person.
Yeah, and we in a quarter meetings, of course, we talk a lot about that. We actually do a core value company speech. We've written this speech. Everybody in the leadership team shares that, not all at once, of course, but each quarter there's a person that has a churn. And we've asked everybody now, as of our last quarterly meeting, every person in the company should know that core value speech, because in their department, they might get asked to give that core value speech, which is pretty daunting, but we're that serious about it.
Awesome. So PureDriven is very on top of the core values. Now, why are the core values important for a multi-location or a franchise business?
Well, it's a good question. If you're a franchise on this call today, or you have general managers or employees, and you're multi-location, what you're going to understand is what I'm going to share with you is a story. We've all heard of the person that we thought was going to be a great franchisee. And in that process, or a great general manager, and in that process, as we're going through and talking to them, they seem to be extremely technically astute. And we think, wow, this is the person that I want to have running whatever it is that I have, whether it's a franchisee or just a store unit, whatever it might be. And often, or not often, but we have all, I think, have the experience, if we've been in management for any period of time, where that didn't line up. That person gets into the position, they become a franchisee, and it's a disaster. And everybody looks at each other and says, what was our process? Sometimes there wasn't a process. Sometimes it was we didn't vet the person very well. We would caught this. Sometimes it's a complete surprise. Hey, we went through, our whole team interviews the person. We have a great process, and we missed what happened, what went wrong. This was just a big discussion at the Emerging Franchise Conference. And you know what? As you listen, you consistently hear a common theme. The values of the organization that you're in, and if they're not defined, they should be. But if you have core values and you bring somebody in and they don't have the same values, it's going to be a disaster. I guarantee it. I don't guarantee much because I can get you in trouble, but I guarantee you're going to have a disaster if a person doesn't align with your values. Now, you might say, wait a second. We haven't defined our core values. Doesn't matter. You've got a set of values in your organization, whether you know it or not. It typically comes from the leadership team. Maybe it's the ownership group, whatever. Defining that's very important so that everybody is clear, because, again, you're going to avoid a lot of problems and a lot of headaches if that is a core value fit. That person is a core value fit first, and then technically sound second.
Definitely. So you told me a pretty significant stat before we got on here about the different franchise business companies and why the core values would be important to them. Could you just kind of reference that for the podcast listeners here?
Yeah, in the USA, there are more than 3,000 different franchise business companies. And so what makes your business and your franchises different than the rest? And it's always a question I'm asking people. What makes you unique? What makes you different? And I can tell you unequivocally, the number one thing should be that you have defined and you have a tight set of core values, and the company is crazy about following them.
Awesome. And my last question for you is, because I know a lot of people, if they're just learning about the core values for the first time here today, they might already have a franchise running. So how do they go about deciding on their core values if they already have a business running? Would you say that they should look at what's successful in their company right now, or do they start from scratch, or do they do kind of an in-between thing? How do they go about that? Because I know PureDriven was in the same boat where we hadn't defined them until a few years into the company. Yeah,
and that's a very good point. What we did as an exercise is we got the leadership team together, and we started making a list of not necessarily people, but of a personality or of something we loved. And we started asking ourselves the question, if we could work with a certain individual, who would we pick? And we started kind of teasing out that whole piece of it of this is the value that really matters. And all of a sudden it just comes together and it clicks. Now, interestingly enough, PureDriven actually had 7 core values when we started. If you remember that.
I remember that.
You know what we found? We found that 3 of our core values, while still critically important to us, they were something that were deeply embedded already into the other values, and that it was more complicated to have 7 core values that we talked about consistently And so as we dug into that as a leadership team, we recognized the 4 core values that really kind of cut through everything, really spoke to what we really believed in, were the 4 that we mentioned earlier. And so that made it pretty interesting because we came back to the company, as you recall, and said, we know that there's 4 that we really want to be tight to and we want to engage. So it's not, you don't have to have it perfect, but it does matter that you have them and that you focus on them.
Yeah, and then the one thing I think that we should just touch on is that a core value should be shared by everyone in the company. It's not a skill. So if there's 100 different departments in your company, everyone would have those same core values, but they just have a different skill set. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at, is the core values are everyone in the company. It's not just one department has these 4 core values and this department has these 4. It's everyone shares these 4, these 5, these 6 core values.
Right. And we've learned this process through Traction EOS. And I'm sure some of you are listening going, is that Traction EOS? And the answer is yes, it is. Thank you, Gina Wickman. But everything you do in terms of firing, hiring, promoting, should be around those core values.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we do each day. And hopefully as you get those great core value alignments, like you said, that's across everybody. Everybody owns those. They're near and dear to everybody. But everybody has a different function within the company, and everybody has different gifts and skill sets and so on, but still believe in and love those core values. And the magic starts to happen once you have that in place.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you very much, Chris. I know we're going to talk about these again one day, and we'll probably bring it all together in a different podcast episode, but that is a really good touch on what a core value is, and hopefully it gets some people thinking about what their core values are in their company. That's all we have time for today, Chris, but I'm sure we'll see you again here.
Well, thanks, Steve. It's been awesome hanging out with you.
Definitely, and thank you for listening to the podcast, everybody. We'll see you right here next time on ATM.
You just listened to All Things Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast to catch every new episode every day. Want to be a guest on the show? Sign up at puredriven.com/guest. See you tomorrow here at the ATM.